I have a question. We just talked about legacy. That's what that song's about. And that's what that last song, The Blessing, it's about. It's about praying over future generations, but also it's praying a blessing over future generations. It's the product. If God is blessing your children and your children and their children and their children and their children, it's a generational blessing that is a product of you walking in the ways of God, you doing what he wants, you honoring him with your life. That's what that song is about. And we're talking about money. And see, here's the thing. Just as Americans in general, we see money in just real messed up ways. And my question is, what kind of legacy do you want to leave? How do you want to be remembered? So let me hop to something real quick in here. Mark chapter 10. This was not planned until the 9 o'clock, but Mark chapter 10, this guy walks up to Jesus. They call him the rich young ruler. And he says, this is verse 17. As Jesus started on his way, a man ran up to him and fell on his knees before him. Good teacher, he asked, what must I do to inherit eternal life? Why do you call me good? Jesus answered, no one is good except for God alone. You know the commandments. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not give false testimony. You shall not defraud. Honor your father and mother. Teacher, he declared, all of these things I have kept since I was a boy. Jesus looked at him and he loved him. One thing you lack, he said, go sell everything you have and give to the poor and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come follow me. At this, the man's face fell. He went away sad because he had great wealth. I'm not going to tell you this morning you need to sell everything you have. I think that was advice for one man in a moment because he worshiped his things and he lived in his pride more than he worshiped his God. And so in that moment, the most loving thing Jesus could say to him is just give all that up. Put your priorities in the right place. But the question I have for you is, what kind of legacy do you want to live? Because here's the problem. The rich young ruler walked away sad because he knew what he would have to give up. He walked away sad because he knew what he would have to give up. And in the end, we don't know what he does. But if the rich young ruler decided, I'm keeping my wealth and I'm just going to live a good life, I'm going to be a good person. Anybody heard that before? Just be a good person. I'm spiritual, so I pray and I just try to be a good person, but I don't subscribe to anything. It's the world we live in. And so he say he does that. Here's the problem. He didn't honor God with his life. He didn't invest his life, his time, his effort, his money in honoring God and in moving the mission forward. And so what is the rich young ruler's legacy if he did not follow Jesus? What did he leave behind? Ultimately, what happened to the rich young ruler if he did not decide to follow Jesus and sell everything is that his goodness amounted to nothing but garbage. It meant nothing. It meant nothing because he didn't do it to honor the name of Jesus. He didn't do it to lift God up in this world. He didn't do it for the right reason. He did it to appease himself so he could feel like a good person. And what legacy did he leave behind? What did he amount to if he didn't follow Jesus? If he didn't do what Jesus asked in that moment, all of his wealth was wasted. Why? How could it be wasted? Because he didn't use it to honor God, because he didn't use it to invest in people, because it was wasted. You see, at the end of the day, if I want my life to amount to something, if I want my dollars to amount to something, if I want my effort to amount to something, if I want to matter in a way that lasts, I have to submit. I have to submit to the will of God in my life. I have to submit to his word in my life. All the things that I was messed up in doing, I have to repent and turn from. And then I have to follow him. And that's it. So what does it look like? We're 10, 10, 80, 10% give, 10% save. We did those 10% or 80% live. So the whole idea is that if I can live off of 80% of my income, I'll be free. I'm not controlled by my dollars. I don't have to think about everything every day. And if I'm saving 10%, I'm prepared. I'm prepared because I save money so I can save people. Sometimes people's me, sometimes people's a guy down the street, sometimes people's somebody I don't know, but I save money so I can save people. So you save money so you can be prepared, right? And then you tithe because you got to put God first in your finances. And if you don't, if you're not putting God first in your finances, how's he ever going to bless them? So 10, 10, 80, we're on the 80. What does it look like to live? What does it look like to live, to point my money in a direction that honors God and to live that way? And the first thing I'll say is I'm not a financial advisor, so I'm not going to tell you how to manage your money. 10, 10, 80 is a nice, really rudimentary plan. But, you don't want me to be your financial advisor because I'm not. I probably don't make more money than you. And I have a rule. If somebody's going to tell me how to use my finances, they should make more money than me. So I'm not going to break my own rule. But I have some principles. As to how we should do that, and they're found in Proverbs. And this is why it matters. It matters because you're going to spend most of your life working to make money. So if you're spending all of that time, what legacy are you leaving with it? Is it all going to be wasted? You see, if you hoard it all, we're bouncing around today. So we're in Mark, now we're going to Luke, right? So Luke chapter 12, we've done this one every day, or every week so far. So 12:32, do not be afraid, little flock, for your Father has been pleased to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions and give to the poor. Provide yourselves purses that will not wear out, a treasure in heaven that will never fail, where no thief comes near and no moth destroys, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So what Jesus is saying is don't put your treasure in things that'll disappear. I mean, listen, you could work your whole life and you could manage your finances perfectly and you could leave $1 million for your kids. And here's the problem. The government's getting 300,000 of it or something like that before they ever even see it. And they already taxed you on it before you got it. And then by the time it gets to them, it's less than it was. And maybe it's not 300, but you get the idea. It's less than it was. And then they get it. And they're not going to value it the way you did. They didn't work for that. So then, maybe they spend it well. Like maybe you have a really responsible kid. And then, maybe they buy a G-Wagon and there ain't none left. You know what I mean? That's a Mercedes. For those of you it's a Mercedes SUV that comes standard with bulletproof glass. Anyway, maybe that happens and maybe there's nothing left. Like at the end of the day, how much does that last? Like John Rockefeller, the man, his wealth amounted to 2% of the national GDP. If that were the case today, it would be something like almost $1 trillion. It's stupid. Or maybe not a trillion, but it's a lot. I can't remember. Too many numbers on Google, but it's a lot. It's more than Bezos has got. If that were the same today, it would be ridiculous. His wealth is starting to disappear because you've gone through generations and generations and generations. And guess what, y'all? None of y'all are starting Standard Oil today. And then none of y'all are going to see Standard Oil get broken up and then make 3 times more money because of it. Because that's what happened. His big monopoly got broken into multiple companies. He was a controlling owner of all of them, and he made more money. That's not going to happen to you. And even his wealth is almost gone. And we're 100 years down the road, 115 years down the road. Didn't last that long. I mean, relatively almost gone. I'm not saying they're broke, but you get the idea. They still got nicer stuff than I do. It's not the same. It doesn't last very long. He built University of Chicago. One day that place will sit in ruins. Why? I'm not saying that it's bad. I'm just saying that things break. Things get destroyed. Things go away. That's the way the world works. So what do you want your legacy to be? What do you want? What do you want your legacy to be? What are you doing with the 60, 70, 80% of your life you're working or sleeping, and you're sleeping because you got to work. So what are you doing? What are you investing that in? What's it matter? if it's like most people, you're working to pay bills, and you got bills because you're keeping up with the Joneses. You're doing what you're supposed to do, right? Like, that's how this works in America. You come out of high school, you go to college. Why do you go to college? You don't really know. You think you want to be a philosopher, so you get a philosophy degree. Dumb, right? And then you do that. You spend a bunch of your parents' money, and you take out loans you have to pay. Like, you take out loans, and you do all of this, and then as soon as you're done doing that, what's going to happen? How's this going to work out? You get out of college, and you go find a job. You go find a job. And meanwhile, you have to find a job when you're like $100,000 in debt and it's a mess, and you have 6 months to be able to make a loan payment, a 15-year loan payment on $100,000. Good luck with that philosophy degree, right? You get out of college, you get a job, you start working, and then, you buy a house. And it's the first house, so it's a little crappy. You buy what you can afford, and you work it, and you grow, and you get better. And then if you're around here, you're probably going to be able to sell it at a profit on some level or another, because housing values never seem to go down here. And so you do that, and then, you're married, you got kids now, and so you get another house. You take the money that you got from the first house, you put it in the next house, right? Meanwhile, the whole time, you're making more money, but you ain't got more money in your pocket because you're spending more money because you got the car too. Like, you started, with the 98 Civic, but now you got to pay off the 2022 Suburban, and it's expensive, and all of a sudden, all your payments got at least 4 digits in them. And what are you doing? And you're working your whole life away so that people can look at your stuff and think you look cool. Or so your butt can be warm for the first 5 minutes you sit in a seat. Or so you have enough rooms to have enough TVs for your children so they don't bother you. You know what I mean? Like, that's what you're doing. Is all of that effort really worth it? Because in 2 years, you're going to have to buy a new TV. They're going to have some kind of, special gel you just rub on your wall, and it takes up the whole wall, and now you got a TV. And you're going to have to buy that, and it's going to cost $5,000 because it's brand new. 3 years later, it'll cost $200. You know what I mean? And then eventually you're going to have to get that car. Probably before you paid it off, you're going to have to get a new one. And after a while, you're going to need to remodel the kitchen. What's it worth? It's a lot of work just to be more comfortable, just for your butt to sit on something that's softer. I do like softer things. And I do like nicer jeans. I don't want to have to wear the Walmart jeans because they're uncomfortable. I got fat legs. It's weird. I'm not trying to make you feel terrible. I'm just trying to ask, what's it worth? Is that KitchenAid really going to fulfill you? Because you're going to spend $500 on it. And you want it because you have all the attachments. But then you find out the attachments cost $200 a piece. And then after 3 years of having it, you realize you only use it when you make chocolate chip cookies. And the attachments do a lot of things, but they do them all very poorly. And you spend $600 on attachments that you've used once. Am I making anybody uncomfortable here? Should I go after dads? Because that was kind of mean. Like you get the Traeger, but then Traeger is wood pellets, so you have to have something to cover it, because if the wood pellets get wet, then they melt. And you have mulch in your Traeger. You can't cook with mulch. So then you get that, but then you have to cover it. You've already spent $700 on the grill that connects to your Wi-Fi so you can cook with your phone. Right? And then you get in there, you make the food and everything else, and you're doing all this, and you've made a 20-pound brisket for you, your wife, and 2 kids. The one thing I'll give chocolate chip cookies and brisket is that in 50 years, nobody's going to talk about your Suburban, but they will talk about your chocolate chip cookies and brisket. Maybe some of us need to invest in more kitchen appliances. I don't know. What's it matter? What legacy are you leaving? You're doing all this work. that 80% of your money, that 80% represents 60, 70, 80% of your life. It should matter. So principles, be in Proverbs for a minute. Principles as to how I should view money. Proverbs 22, I told you we're bouncing around a little bit. Proverbs 22, the first proverb here. If you've never read Proverbs, Proverbs reads like a book full of fortune cookies. Like, I'm not trying to diminish it. There's a ton of wisdom. It's worth reading. But like, it reads like a book full of fortune cookies. So when you read through it, if you're trying to read it like a narrative or like a poem, it's not going to work. Like, pretty much each statement stands alone. So we're going to track through, and I'm going to skip some Proverbs if you're looking in your Bible. I'm going to skip some, but that's because that fortune cookie didn't fit. You know what I mean? And that's just, it is what it is. When we're in the narrative, when we're using a narrative and we're going to preach from, a whole story, you're not going to see me skip around and leave too much out, right? Because I don't want to just highlight, the parts that I like and not the ones that I don't. But this is just a little bit different. So Proverbs 22, the first proverb here, a good name is more desirable than great riches. To be esteemed is better than silver or gold. When I'm faced with the choice to choose between money or people. I choose relationships over riches. If we can choose relationships over riches, at the very least, we're doing something that matters. I'm not saying don't work. You got to work, you got to live. I'm not saying don't take out a mortgage so you can get a house. You got to have a house. But like at the end of the day, are you going to spend your whole life working to have more, or are you going to spend your whole life working and building relationships? And it matters. Priorities matter. You're like, if you're sitting in here and you're analytical, you're like, you can do both, Robert. Don't be weird. You can. But priorities matter. And if I'm faced with a choice of I could make more money or I could hurt that person, I'm choosing the person. You got to choose the person, right? Does this make sense? We choose relationships over riches. When Jesus gave the greatest commandment, he didn't say, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself and take real good care of your wallet. These are all equal. He said, love your neighbor as yourself, or he said, love God, and then love your neighbor as yourself. He actually said the second is like it. So he elevates loving people almost to the point of loving God. That's how important it is. And he didn't say nothing about money. Matter of fact, when Jesus talks about money, he's like, hey, give it away and don't worry about it. Like, that's pretty much all he says. Other than the one that's real awkward for us, which is it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to go to heaven. That's awkward because guess what? You live in America. Most of you are rich. I've never seen a camel go through the eye of a needle, but I sure hope it's possible. So when I'm faced with a choice, I choose relationships over riches. Verse 3, this is the third proverb in here. Verse 3, the prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and pay the penalty. I should remember that I have a choice. A lot of times when it comes to money, when it comes to purchasing, I forget I have a choice because that Amazon buy now button, it just draws me in. Talking about impulse, right? Prudence over impulse. Should always be prudent and not impulsive when it comes to our money, right? When it comes to how we live. Why? Because when you're impulsive with your money, you do dumb stuff. I'll tell you a story since I've been mean to you for 10 minutes. I'll be mean to me now. So y'all remember the stimulus checks? So I wasn't exactly the target demographic. My wife and I both kept our jobs, and we had no mortgage or rent because we were living in my parents' basement because I'm a millennial. It's fine. We had a kid down there too. Whatever. We were building a house at the time. So literally we had the least bills we'd had in our adult lives, and we were good to go. And not to mention, all the restaurants were closed. So there goes half the money I'm going to spend, And so, the check comes in and I'm torn, because on the one hand, I'm like, this is cool. But on the other hand, I'm like, man, I don't need this. And my great-grandchildren are going to be paying this off. And so I was like, I don't know what to do. And I did what a lot of people did. I put it in the stock market because I'm like, yo, stock market's down. It's got to go back up, right? And so I'm going to bore some of you for just a second, but stick with me. It'll be okay. I'll get to the point. So at the time, Ford was like $6. And American Airlines, I was like, first of all, Ford's flush with cash always. So $6, okay. So I put a little bit in that. And then American Airlines, right? American Airlines, it's American Airlines. America's not going to let that go under. And it was trading at like $10. So I'm like, I'm going to buy some of that. Even if they don't fly another flight, we're still going to have our own airline. Like, that was my logic, right? You ready? So that's what we got. And then Norwegian Cruise Lines, I'm like, yo, I don't know if Norway cares about their cruises or not, but Norway doesn't own the cruise line. I was joking. But, you know, it was trading at like half of what it had been trading at like a couple of months before. So I'm like, I'm going to buy some of that too, right? And keep in mind, I'm not dropping like, you know, I'm not independently wealthy dropping a ton. Like literally it was a stimulus check, right? So I dropped that in there, it's, you know, whatever. And so it's there and I'm like, oh, sweet. It makes some money and I'm like, yeah, ooh, I'm going to be cool. I'm a day trader. I'll pull it out and then put it back in when the price goes down. And I did it and I pulled it off and I made like $300, you know, like, and I'm like, all right, the price starts going back down. I'm like, all right, put it back in. I'm like, maybe we can do this again. And then the price just keeps dropping. And I'm like, this is not good. I'm gonna lose money. Man is gonna kill me. And you know, when it's like that, like the general rule is you kind of just leave the money there and it'll even out because the stock market drops, but it always comes back. And so I was like, and I got to zero and got out. You know, I got to zero and just got out. I was like, I'm done. Can't do it anymore. It's too stressful. You know? And I'm like, I don't want my wife to be mad at me. And then I spent all that money on hunting equipment. Yeah, you laugh at that, but here's the deal. Ford is now trading at $24 a share. American Airlines is trading at like, I don't even know, like double or triple what it was. Norwegian Cruise Lines, double or triple what it was. If I just left the money in there, like, I would have had a little more money. But I'm impulsive. I was afraid I was going to lose money, and then I spent it instead. I don't know. That was stupid, not prudent, impulsive. But see, a lot of us kind of manage our money that way. We just kind of see something we want, or we get nervous, or we make dumb decisions, and then the next thing you know, it's gone. And it's got a 20% interest rate on it because you put it on a credit card. And now that credit card owns you. What's it worth? You gonna spend your life building a legacy? You spend your life changing people's lives? Spend your life mattering to people? You're gonna pay off a credit card. Once you have the debt, you need to pay it off. But maybe don't build it, you know? Because, you know, like who really needs that new pair of Jordans that you're gonna be worried about getting dirty? You know? Anyway, next one. This is uncomfortable. Y'all should I feel like you should, like if this was a class, I'd be like, talk amongst yourself just so I could feel a little better. Y'all are real quiet. All right, we're in verse 4. Humility is the fear of the Lord. Its wages are riches and honor and life. I should choose humility over pride when it comes to how I manage my financial life. That's what I was talking about before. We always think that there's more money to be made. We always think, and there might be. It's just whether or not it's worth it. Sometimes it's worth it, sometimes it's not. You know, we always think there's more money to be made. We always think that the next house will make us feel better. The next car will make us feel better. The fancier jeans will make us feel better. Like if you're a middle-aged dad, you remember the first time you bought jeans that buckle. And your child still makes fun of you for the pattern on the back of them. But y'all don't remember those? Those are tacky. Or the dragon shirts, where it's just like dragon right here. Anyway, maybe you guys don't shop there, but my dad does. And it's weird when he wears a dragon embroidered shirt. So, or jeans with the design on the butt. Like, I don't want to look at your butt. First of all, it's not there. And secondly, I don't want to look at it. Maybe those nice things, like you want them to make you feel better, or you want them so that you can look like you can match somebody else. And I know this sounds like I'm talking to a bunch of high schoolers, but I also know that y'all know that in somewhere in your life, you spend money that way. Maybe it's not as stupid as shoes. Maybe it's not that dumb, but there is somewhere in your life where you need something because somebody else has it. That's pride, it's jealousy, and it makes you make dumb choices. And our culture, our culture kind of venerates that whole idea. Like, there's an Instagram page, or there used to be, Preachers with Sneakers, and these dudes are rolling up in $5,000 tennis shoes, and whatever. If you got book money, you got it like that, buy whatever you want. I don't care. But at the same time, that is bred out of people wanting those shoes, envying those shoes, right? Come on, that's dumb. Part of the reason that somebody in here watches Real Housewives of whatever, fill it in. Part of it is you like the drama. Part of it also is you kind of wish your house looked like that. You kind of wish your car looked like that. But here's the problem. Most likely, the house and the car come with all the drama. Pride and envy drive us to do things, and sometimes we won't even name it because we want to have noble intentions. But more often than not, the things that drive us to achieve, the things that drive us to want more, to try to get more, they're not always the best intentions. And so when it comes to my finances, I got to check my heart, because am I choosing to be humble and accept where I am? Or am I choosing to be prideful and constantly strive for more? And I'm not saying that it's wrong to strive for more, but it's wrong when striving for more takes the place of God. And it's really hard to tell the difference. Does that make sense? It's still uncomfortable. I walked all over this both times. Verse 7, the rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender. When you have the opportunity, you may not have the opportunity now, but when you have the opportunity, choose freedom over more. I have had a car payment since I bought my first car. I've never not had a car payment. Once I got one, I never stopped having one. You know why? There has been multiple times that I could have chosen financial freedom from that car payment over a cooler car. And I have a problem. I played with Matchbox toys when I was a kid, and I wanted cool cars. So I've had a car payment since I was 20 years old, right? That's what I'm talking about. When you have the opportunity, choose freedom over more. Why? Because the borrower is slave to the lender. And if you want to dispute that, that's fine, but you work an awful lot to pay a mortgage. And if you don't pay that mortgage, you don't have a house. On some level, your mortgage lender owns you. And that's the price of doing business. That's fine. But at every point that you have the opportunity to choose freedom, that proverb says that you should choose it. At every point that you have an opportunity to be a borrower from less people, the Bible says that you should choose to not borrow more. I understand that it's not as simple nowadays, right? I'm sure some of you guys are businessmen and everything else, and you're like, look, you got to take business loans to be able to do this, and you want to use the bank's money, not your money, and all this stuff, and there's all this stuff that just maybe wasn't there when Solomon's writing this proverb, right? I get it. I understand. These are principles, though, to live by, right? When you do you figure it out. All I'm saying is when you have the opportunity to choose freedom, or you have the opportunity to choose more, More stuff, but more debt, choose freedom, because the borrower is slave to the lender, right? The last one, verse 9, the generous will themselves be blessed, for they share their food with the poor. So choose generosity over gain. Our purpose in this life is to honor God. Our purpose in this life is to worship him and to bring him glory. That's what we do. That's what we were made to do. That's why you'll have these glimpses of heaven in the midst of these moments at church or amongst other believers or these things, because you're or even when you're doing God's will, right? Like you'll have these glimpses where there's just this immense peace and joy and happiness. It's because you're honoring God. You're doing what you were made to do. But Jesus, in the greatest commandment, love God. Second is like it, love people. We're made to worship God and honor his name and elevate his name. And we're made to love people and elevate people. If you spend your whole life just trying to get more stuff, you end up with a nice car, all the attachments for your KitchenAid. That's about it. Even the ones that were close to you that will remember you, eventually they'll stop visiting your headstone because they're busy. But if you can leave a legacy in people that you meet all the time, they may not visit the place that you're buried, but they'll remember the things that you did in their life. You'll leave a legacy behind where not only are you remembered and you've done something, but God's glorified. And you're like, wait a minute, I thought you were talking about my personal finances. I'm saying if your money doesn't help people, if your 80% isn't aimed at people, whether it's your own children, whether it's getting your own financial house in order, then your kids, taking care of your kids and being generous with them, and then it's just the people around you, it's your family, and then you spread it out, whatever. If your personal finances aren't aimed at people and changing people's lives and improving this world, it's kind of not doing what Jesus said. And that's real uncomfortable. But it's just true. I'm not saying that stuff is evil. And I'm not saying that having a nice house is bad. I want nice stuff in a nice house. But I'm saying that when it comes to my priorities, my God says people win. So what does that look like? Maybe you're blessed enough that you can have it all. Maybe you got the nice stuff, the nice house, and you take care of people. There are people that are like that. Maybe you're that person. Figure it out. If you're that person, cool. Be okay with it. Be as generous as you possibly can and be okay with it. If you're not that person, don't try to be that person. Be who you are. But you got to figure out, how can I spend this whole, I'm going to spend 60, 70, 80% of my life working and sleeping. How can I invest it in a way that matters? And if that's just taking care of your family, that is absolutely okay. You do it the best that you can. You just honor God with it. Does it make sense? My grandma. So my Mama Brenda is my dad's mom. She was a kindergarten teacher for, 35 years. I mean, dang, long time. And you can imagine she's the most patient woman on the planet. You imagine running around chasing 5-year-olds when you're 60? No, thank you. That's what she did. And she's a kindergarten teacher. She never made a lot of money. And she never, I remember being a kid and like they were literally selling the farm just to have a little bit of extra money to live off of when times got hard, because they had like 300-400 acres, so they'd sell parts of the farm. Just stuff like that. They were just never, they went through a lot of financial struggle, and then even when it was good, it wasn't great, and so growing up, she never really she would always give us all an equal amount of money. And it's like this thing, like it's like a family legacy thing, because her mom used to give out $10 bills to every grandchild and great-grandchild. Literally you had 45-year-old men getting a $10 bill going, thanks, mama. Like, you know what I mean? And like, that was just how it was. Like my dad got $10, I got $10, And so my grandma did the same thing. And then I went down there. For school. I was about an hour and a half away. And so I got to visit with her a lot. And every time I drove through, she'd give me $20 or she'd give me $40 or just whatever. She'd give me some money. And that was always really helpful because I was always broke. I was in college, no money, and, driving around and everything. So she gave me gas money, basically. She always gave it to me. And then, as we've gotten older, she's doing kind of the same thing. And like, you got to remember, she never really had money. Like she's living off of a state pension plan or whatever, I guess. But she never really had money. There's just not a lot there. And she's always giving it. And then I start, I don't know, as I got older, I pay attention to her. And like literally this woman spent her whole life serving people. She took care of 5-year-olds and did that. And like to the point that kids would not see her from the time they were 5 to the time they were 25, and they'd still know her. And they talk to her. Like, I guess she did a good job, because I don't even remember my kindergarten teacher's name. And then she retired, and when she retired, she took care of my grandfather, because he was like 10, 12 years older than her and just sickly, right? And she took care of him, and she just served him and took care of him, and she did that. Meanwhile, what you got to understand is she's living in a double wide that she'd been living in for 30 years. She's giving me money. It's not a lot of money, but she's giving me money. She's taking care of this guy. They're living in a double wide. They're doing this thing. There's not a single thing about this woman that's upset about her life. She spent 10 years taking care of my grandpa. The man barely ever left the house. Like, this is how crazy it was. He barely left the house, but he had a brand new zero-turn tractor before they were cool. Like, it's just so weird. Like, he's spending money. She's taking care of him, and they ain't really got it, and she's good. She took care of him for 10, 15 years, barely moving. Spent her whole life working for this man. I find out 2-3 years ago, she hates to cook. Dude, I was a kid. She cooked for us all every night. She cooked my grandfather what he asked for every day. And we ate leftovers out of Cool Whip tubs. That's the life we're living. I'll tell you something. I'm more proud of the double wide and the Cool Whip tubs and my grandmother than I am of any of the nice things I've ever bought. I'm more proud of the way that she serves people and takes care of people and worked her whole life to nurture and love people than I would be if she was a billionaire. Why? Because my grandmother matters to people because of who she is and because of who she serves, not because of how much she has or how good she looks. I just want to live a life like that. Can I pray for you? Oh, God, I pray that we would all be convicted to follow your leading in how we manage our money. The Bible lays it out in a pretty general way, and there's a lot of room. There's a lot of room for different strategies, Lord. But I just pray that each one of us would seek you out in how we choose to use our money. Lord, I pray that you would give us wisdom in how we're going to invest all of that time that we spend earning it. If we're going to spend all that time earning it, Lord, let us use it wisely. And God, I pray more than anything, whether everybody ends up rich or everybody ends up poor or everybody ends up dead in the middle, God, I pray more than anything that we would care about people enough that it moves our wallet. And God, I pray more than anything that we would care about people enough that it moves our hearts. I pray that we care about people enough that it moves our feet. Lord, I pray that we could just realize that the life we live isn't about us, it's about you, and it's about loving the people you put in front of us. And that's really, at the end of the day, if we do those things, we'll matter. If we do those things, we'll leave a legacy. If we do those things, then all of the good that we do in our lives, it's not for nothing, it's for you. And if we do those things, all of the money we ever make in our lives, it's not for nothing, it's for you, and it's used to your glory. Let us change things because we follow you. Let us change things because we trust you. Let us impact people because we're obedient. And let us not get messed up in our heads and think that we're great. You're great. And Lord, just let us ride your coattails all the way to the things that we really want, which is joy, which is love, which is hope, which is peace, security. Let us follow you to those places and not try to make them for ourselves.